Hey folks, welcome to the lab. Delighted to have you here. I'm Topher with Sprout Labs, and today we're going to get your Acro set up and hooked up to water, power, Wi-Fi, and totally ready to malt. Let's go. Great, so step one is getting your system out of the box that it was shipped in. Acro is relatively heavy and fragile, and so it's important to do a two-person lift to protect your back and get this thing safely out of its shipping box. When it comes out, it's going to have a protective plastic layer over all of the stainless to prevent it from getting scratched during shipping. So you're just going to go ahead and peel that right off the whole system. And then you can open up your conical, and in there you'll find detailed instructions about how to get that clean, get that set up. Make sure that you remember to put the insulating jacket on, and also put the leg extenders on so that it's at the right height. And then we'll have our two main pieces of hardware, and we just need to get them all hooked up and mated to each other. To start, you need to choose a solid location. So there's several important aspects of this. One, it should really be in a space that has reasonable temperature and humidity. Ideally, ambient conditions are between 55 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. If you go too much hotter than that, you're going to start seriously stressing and taxing the cooling capabilities of the system. And if it's significantly dry or severely humid, you'll also be taxing the system. Realistically, you're going to be dropping some wet grain or spilling some water at some point while you're malting. So it's important to have the system located in a place where the floor can get wet and you can easily clean it up. You really shouldn't be running this on a carpet or a rug. Next is water. It needs to have easy access to water. It remains plumbed in to water during the entire malting cycle so that it can automatically fill and drain steeps and so that it can maintain enough water for the humidification system to function. So that water should be 30 to 40 psi. If it goes significantly above that, we need to hook up a pressure regulating valve, which is an easy thing to do. And it's great and handy to have a second hose that you can hook up. We really ideally have this setup of a pressure regulating valve followed by a Y with two separate valves, and then one line runs to the Acro and the other allows you to still use that faucet. But more importantly for the Acro, when you're unhooking a water line at all, ever, that's pressurized, and so you're going to spray water around if you aren't able to release the pressure from that hose line. And we think that often the easiest way to do that is just a second valve that you can open up and release pressure from. It needs to have good Wi-Fi strength. The system, the most important period of Wi-Fi connectivity is when the system comes online and you select a recipe and it downloads all of that recipe information. It can then run and will continue running if it loses Wi-Fi, but ideally it is hooked up so that it's able to send messages to you, send alerts, and so that you're able to gather malting data and analyze that and track that from afar. If you have poor Wi-Fi wherever you are, we can help you find a proper Wi-Fi extender to be able to make that function and work well. And then finally, power. It should really be plugged into its own dedicated 15 amp, 120 volt circuit, and that should really be running on a GFCI just for safety. Great, so now we're going to move on to setting up the plumbing. So there are a variety of half-inch NPT fittings that are sticking out of Acro all around the box, and we've got a variety of fittings that we have to hook up to those. So on each of those, we need to first put Teflon tape, and that enables us to get a solid leak-free seal, which is absolutely necessary. You need to wrap the Teflon 3 times around each fitting clockwise, and that's about 7.5 inches of Teflon per fitting. So you can go ahead and measure that, rip or cut those, wrap them around the fittings, and then when you're putting each individual fitting on, you can go to hand tight, and then you really don't want to over tighten it, but you can use a wrench to tighten it until you're experiencing and feeling resistance, but tighten carefully. So we'll start with the water in line. This holds the highest pressure And so it's particularly important to make sure that this is a leak-free fitting connection once you've attached it. You have two options here. You can either put a hose fitting or a barbed nipple. In this case, I'm putting a barbed nipple on. We're sort of hard plumbing this system into our own lab. Hoses are great though. It makes it easier to be able to connect and disconnect. If you're using a hose fitting, there's also an included hose valve that allows you to turn water on and off directly at the system. Next, we'll move over to the vessel drain. So this fitting will be a barbed nipple, and this location is where we automatically drain the vessel at the end of washing and at the end of each steep. So this line needs to run either to a floor drain or to a bucket that's able to handle the corresponding volume for whatever quantity of grain you're doing. Next, we've got the two drain caps. These are at the bottom of the system. The one on the left drains the humidifying system, and the one on the right drains the entire system. So when that vessel drain is used, we drain all of the water in the vessel, but none of the water in the system. And we use water in the system for our cooling system throughout air rest and germination. So you only take these caps off at the end of each malting cycle. So after 7 days of use, you'll then open them to be able to fully clean out the system and dry it out before you use it next. At this moment, we can slide the drain pan in. It goes down underneath those caps, and the drain pan allows us to collect condensate that can occur inside the system when we're cooling, and is also useful for being able to drain out of the system and when you open up those two caps. There are two channels on the bottom side of Acro that this drain pan slides into to be able to hold it in place and push it all the way in. Okay, now we're going to move around the corner to the vessel side of Acro, where we've got two water lines that we have to prepare and hook up. So the lower line takes water from the vessel into Acro so that it can cool it and aerate it, and then it puts it back into the system through the upper line. The lower line also has an external filter for you to be able to clean, and that hooks up to the ball valve that connects to the bottom of the vessel. And both of these are cam lock fittings to just increase the viability of these parts long term, because you'll be routinely connecting and disconnecting these. So again, Teflon tape, and then attaching those cam lock fittings and getting them all ready to go. Next, we've got the duct. The duct does not need Teflon tape because this is purely for air. No water moves through this duct, and this duct will get hot during kilning. So it simply threads into the system, and then it has an elbow, and from that elbow there are two options. We'll start off with this ball valve assembly, which we'll be using during steeping and air resting. But once you come to germ and kiln, the system will prompt you to trade over to a straight line, larger fitting that threads into that same elbow and then tri-clamp connects to the vessel. The reason that there are two different ones primarily is a valve to be able to switch over from wet to dry environments, but it also has to do with temperatures and airflows. We use significantly less air during air rest compared to germination, compared to kilning, and there is a plastic seating inside of that valve that can't handle the high temperatures of kilning, so that's why it's replaced. When we're hooking up Acro to the vessel, it's a great opportunity to use the casters on the bottom of your system. So when these are unlocked, it enables you to slide this under the vessel and get that ductwork nicely connected up to the vessel. Ideally, you'll thread in the ball valve assembly all the way, which will make it a little bit lower than the vessel. You can then place the gasket that has a false bottom built into it on top of the valve, and then unthread just a little bit while pulling up in order to be able to hook it up to the vessel. This is the smaller false bottom that we use when the grain is down in the cone. So during steeping and during air rest, we'll trade this false bottom out for just a simple gasket when we switch over to the germination and kiln setup for the duct work. And then we'll also dump the grain out the bottom and move over to a large false bottom that sits up in the cylinder component of the vessel. Now we've got the racking port and a few other connections to be made on the vessel. So the racking port has a racking arm that goes into that port. It points downwards and is clamped on, and then that's where the other water line connects to Acro. On the inside of the vessel where the racking port is, we've got a plastic tubing and capped elbow, and this slides on and points up. Cooled water and also air and aerated water will be moving through this line. Finally, we've got a temp sensor and the ball valve for the vessel power lines, and we'll just connect both of those to their corresponding spots on Acro. And now we're going to come around the corner to finish things up with power. So we've got a fuse that needs to be hooked in, and then we've got the power connection. And then we'll move around the corner to the front, and we're going to hook up water and drain. And if you're using a hose, you'll need to run Teflon tape around that fitting before threading it on. And if you're using a tube like we are in this situation, you're going to need to use a clamp to be able to make sure that that's a leak-proof connection. And finally, our system should be all set up, so we're going to lock these casters and keep it in place. We'll unlock those next when we're switching over to germination and dumping grain out of the bottom of the vessel. So now we've got a completed mechanical setup, and here's how the system looks when it's all together. So next we're going to create an account, get your Acro on Wi-Fi, and then we'll be all set up. So now we're going to get your Acro hooked up to Wi-Fi, which will require both a computer and the system, and ideally you can go through this flow with your computer right next to the system. So to start, we're going to navigate to sproutlabs.com, and in the upper right hand corner we'll click on sign up, and then you can either create an account or log in using existing credentials. And once we log in, it's going to show us to the dashboard, and in the upper right hand corner we're going to navigate to the user settings area, and we'll click on Malthouse. And inside of there you'll see your Malthouse, and you can click on it and then click connect on the Wi-Fi connection section. This will bring you to a flow where first you'll turn your Acro on, and then it'll navigate through a few screens, and once it's prepared and waiting to connect to Wi-Fi, we'll navigate to our own Wi-Fi network, and we'll select Sprout Labs-Acro. And once you've completed that, you'll click next, and this will now bring us to the Wi-Fi flow. Once it's located in Acro, we'll connect to that Acro, we'll scan for available networks that the machine is seeing, and then select the network that you're looking to connect to, enter your password, connect. It'll send those credentials down to the machine, and then it'll take about 20 seconds to validate and to connect. In that time, you'll be booted off of the Acro Wi-Fi network on your computer, and your computer should reconnect to whatever normal Wi-Fi network you're connected to. And then on the device itself, you'll see a success communication saying that it has connected to Wi-Fi, and you can go ahead and complete device registration, and it'll bring you back to your Malthouse's page, which should demonstrate and show a successful Wi-Fi connectivity symbol next to your Malthouse. Well, there you go. You've got a fully set up system now, and you're ready to malt. Thanks so much for swinging by today. Pleasure to always have you here. See you on the next one.